Hello and welcome to 10 by 9, where 9 people have up to 10 minutes each to tell a true story from their own life. I'm Paul Dorn, and this is a special 10 by 9 podcast to mark the 18th birthday of the Black Box. As many of you will know, 10 by 9's home venue is the Black Box in Belfast. It's where it all began 13 years ago. And so when they announced they were celebrating their coming of age and asked if I would run a special 10 by 9 to mark the occasion, I was delighted and honoured. So the podcast is a little different this week, less of me and more of the live event itself. There are still 3 stories as usual, but you'll hear them as they were on the day to give you even more of a flavour of the live event. And if you haven't been, maybe come and join us. But let's kick off with a little context from the director of the Black Box, Catherine McShane.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming. My name's Catherine. I've had the pleasure of being the director for the Black Box for the last year and a half, and we're here today for a very special event for the Black Box's 18th birthday. So over those 18 years, there's been some marvellous things that have happened in here. One of those things being 10 by 9, one of our longest running events since 2011, Paul? Yeah. So really looking forward to hearing some great stories today, and thanks for everyone for coming. So you're very welcome to stick around for the day and celebrate with us. We'll be running to the wee hours of the morning, hopefully. So thanks again for coming, folks, and a big cheers for the Black Box on its 18th. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Good afternoon. I don't think I've ever said that at a 10 by 9 before. Welcome to 10 by 9, where 9 people have up to 10 minutes each to tell a true story from their own life. I'm Paul Dorn. 10 by 9 started in the Black Box in 2011 in the Green Room. That's the front bar. And we had about 5 storytellers and an audience of 25 people who'd been bullied and cajoled and bribed to come along. Now we're in here in the main room every month, and we have up to 200 people. And they come here to hear extraordinary stories told by what we would consider ordinary people. And that is a great joy, and it's a wonderful honour to actually get insights into people's lives. Many of them I have never met before. So that's how it works, and that would be how it would work in an ideal situation. However, if you look at the poster, it'll say, kind of gives away, it's 9-ish people, i.e. it's 8. We've got 8. Now, the reason for that is we could have had 15, but we're limited on time because after this, we have John Shuttleworth. Yes, so now anybody who's telling a story tonight can say, factually, yeah, I opened for John Shuttleworth once. So there you go. What we're going to have tonight is I have asked some of our funniest storytellers to bring their funniest story, because today is a celebration. And it's the 18th birthday of the best venue on this island. I have no doubt about it. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful place. Okay, let's get on with the stories. First up is Helen McClements, a long-time supporter of 10 by 9. She's followed by Jim Livingstone and then Paul Brady. And there might be the odd F-bomb scattered around in there, but you'll hardly notice. Anyway, that's enough from me. Enjoy the stories, and here's Helen.
Imagine you are a substitute teacher in a grammar school in Belfast. There may be a permanent position coming up, so you find yourself in everything but the crib to make a good impression. But in teaching, I have learnt, it doesn't matter how many hours you spend preparing your A-level texts or how you bring the GCSE poetry syllabus to life. Just accept it. If anyone is going to be hurtling over the Glen Shane Pass of a frosty night in February to watch a piss-poor production of A Streetcar Named Desire, it is going to be you. But to really get ahead, you need to show initiative and organise a trip, some class of an outing that will be both informative and enjoyable. So how my heart leapt when I saw in the Year 8 textbook there was a chapter devoted to the Anglo-Saxon myth Beowulf, based on a translation by our very own Seamus Heaney. And how even more serendipitous that the QFT, my favourite cinema in the entire world, was showing a film of said story, and as a matinee. It appeared that the god of newly qualified teachers was shining down on me. Indeed, I thought, why stop at one class? I'd organise for all the first-year classes to go. So I booked the Belfast Bus Company and organised 150 concession tickets. I typed the letter to the parents, collected the reply slips, counted and transferred the money. I recruited the number of staff for the required ratio of children and left cover for my classes that afternoon. Should you find yourself dithering between the £5 or £10 bottle of wine for the English teacher at Christmas, please always go for the latter. Trust me, they have earned it. Finally, we boarded the buses and off we set. There was a sense of excitement in the air as we disembarked at College Green and the little ones descended and gathered locust-like at the QFT bar and bought them clean out of Revels and Maltesers. I looked on with a beatific smile. This was no typical excursion to a generic multiplex. I had organised a truly different cultural experience for these children, one which they would never forget. In future years, they would say, "Do you remember when nice Miss McClements organised the trip to an art house cinema and ignited within us a passion for film?" Well, it was all down to her. So in we went, and dutiful teachers that we were, we spread out so we could monitor their behaviour, lest any other member of the audience be disturbed. As I settled in my seat, I smiled over at my friend Anne. All the hard work was done, and I could, as they say, sit back and enjoy the show. Now, I'd studied the text in university, and I knew there was a fair amount of slaughter and savagery, but I had every faith that this production, with its PG certificate, would be entirely suitable for my young charges. I was wrong. In the opening scene, marauding Danes came stampeding towards an odd-looking fellow and his even odder-looking son. The son, who we come to know as Grendel, hides but watches his father being thrown to his death onto the rocks below. The small boy is spared, but decides he is going nowhere without his father's head as a keepsake. He clambers down the cliff and does a bit of light hacking so he can obtain his ghoulish memento. It was all very brutal and shocking. I always looked to Anne to keep me right, and I stared over, and she made a hand movement as if batting away a fly. Anne thought I had a tendency to overreact at the best of times. But more battle scenes ensued with considerable blood and gore. The small, odd-looking child turns out to be a troll, and grown up he sets to murdering all around him to avenge his father's death. Beowulf, the mighty warrior, comes to the aid of the Danes, but they are no match for this ferocious troll. Many more heads are lopped off and men disemboweled, all in graphic detail. Small girls leave en masse to go to the toilet for a puke. I looked at Anne again and she smiled in a "we're still all grand here" kind of a way. But it wasn't just the violence that was shocking. The language was also very, very coarse, and there was one deeply regrettable reference to bestiality. I think it involved squirrels. Again, I looked over at Anne and she gesticulated as much, saying, "It's all fine." Lest you think I am exaggerating, one review reads, "The film's near fatal flaw is its dialogue, with more overuse of the F word than any two Samuel L. Jackson movies put together." I looked at my watch and saw, to my enormous relief, that there were only 10 minutes remaining until we could leave and I could start drafting out an apology to the parents. But then the screenwriters decided to add a little spice. An action film, well, it just isn't worth its salt without a sex scene, is it? And as the witch Selma explains to Beowulf that she has a bastard son, we get a flashback to his conception with none other than Grendel, the troll. My year 8s were innocent, but they were neither blind nor stupid. There were very audible gasps and titters. I looked over at Anne. This time there was no reassuring smile. She shrugged and lifted her palms upwards in the sort of gesture that said, "This is now in the hands of God, and please, let's pray that none of the parents of these children are high up in the DUP." I leapt up and ran into the lobby. I have an entire first form in that cinema watching a troll and a witch having sex. Doggy style. I yelled at the chap on reception. He looked on perturbed and lethargically looked at his computer. "Ah, yes," he said. "Says here it's certificate 15, not a PG after all." As I walked back into the auditorium, the credits had started to roll. Some children looked delighted with themselves. Others seemed a bit stunned. I had nothing left to give. I took the window seat at the front of the bus and felt its coldness beside my face. The children were all in a state of high animation, although a few did stop and say, "Are you okay, miss?" which was rather sweet. The teachers walked up and down the aisles, showing them the QFT programme where the PG rating was clearly, indeed prominently displayed. "Miss McClements would never have taken you to see that film had she known what was in it," I heard them say to reassure them. I can safely admit that I wasn't right for weeks afterwards. But those other teachers, if ever they were in need of alternative employment, could get careers as spin doctors. There was not one single letter from a parent. After school that day, we sojourned to a local bar where I consumed a glass of red wine the size of my head in record time. It's not every day children are subjected to graphic images of torture, references to bestiality, and finally troll sex, all on your watch. Never again, said I, will I organise another bloody trip.
Oh, Helen, thank you so much. What a pleasure. I remember talking to Helen after she told that story originally, and she said that at the time it had genuinely been a very traumatic event for her, but that talking about it and telling the story really put a distance. And it actually reminded me then of this quote, and from a modern day Dylan Thomas: "Once we have spoken our saddest story, we can be free of it." Taylor Swift. And I promised I was going to get through this 10 by 9 without mentioning Taylor Swift once. And I've mentioned her twice. Oh, there you go. Okay, next up, he's been a long time 10 by 9er. Big warm welcome, please, for Jim Livingstone.
Apologies, I'm not used to being up this early. So. Anyone can have an accident. But as Aristotle once said, yes, it's going to be one of those stories, the ideal man bears the accidents of life with dignity and grace, making the best of circumstances. I like to think that's been my philosophy in life. Sorry, I thought I might have heard my wife laughing there. No one plans to have an accident, obviously, but we can all learn lessons from the experience. Don't drive so fast. Ensure your stepladder is securely anchored. Don't take unnecessary risks after drinking a lot of alcohol. Most of all, know your limits. Now, 3 accidents in 30 minutes, that takes a special talent. Thank you. For me, the worst of it all happened 35 years ago at a dinner party. My old school pal Jerry and his wife Mary had just moved into their new modern house in Belfast. They were very proud of their beautiful home, having spent most of their savings decorating and furnishing it in the most modern and tasteful style. They had invited my wife Paul and myself with Damien and his wife Anne to celebrate their dream home. Jerry, Damien and myself had all been students together at Queen's during the 70s and had just recently begun our careers as civil servants in the Northern Ireland Civil Service. Mary delivered the most gorgeous meal. Jerry supplied liberal amounts of wine, beer, and spirits throughout. The conversation was incessant, noisy, and filled with laughter and good-natured banter. We all shared so many fond memories and experiences and had been close friends for many years. The cheese board and coffee had arrived, with liqueurs, of course, all now in a haze of cigarette and cigar smoke. We were seated at a beautiful mahogany table with candelabra as a centrepiece and matching Georgian-style dining chairs. Clannad music played gently in the background, and Jerry was regaling us with the story of his recent exploits, playing guitar and joining a folk group. I was relishing my very large glass of Drambuie and cigarette and feeling very relaxed. I started to rock gently back and forth on my chair, just the way my mother used to scold me for so long ago. I smiled quietly to myself as I recalled her admonishment. Stop rocking that bloody chair, you idiot. Stop it, now. Actually, she was from Donegal, but I think, well, but when she was here in Belfast, she spoke with a Belfast accent. Jerry was reaching the climax of his story about a very odd guitar teacher he had met and his repeated but unsuccessful attempts to join the folk group, when suddenly there was a sharp crack. I felt myself falling backwards and down. I hit the wooden floor with a thump and a crash, the ornate Georgian chair in pieces around me. Screams. Everybody was screaming. I heard Jerry exclaim, "Oh, for fuck's sake, Jim!" I heard Mary cry, "My beautiful chair!" I heard Damien groan, "Jesus, Jim, what have you done now?" And of course I heard Paula say, "Jerry, Mary, I'm so sorry, we'll pay for all the damage." I lay on the floor with a bruised back and very bruised ego, wondering why no one had shouted, "Are you all right, Jim?" It was an accident. I didn't mean to break their lovely chair. It was my fault, yes, but it was an accident. Of course, if I'd listened to my mother, it wouldn't have happened. But then I thought, maybe the chair was faulty. That's right. Maybe it was faulty and it wasn't my fault after all. Wisely, I didn't say that. I just whimpered, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. It just collapsed under me." I clambered up and looked in horror at the shattered chair and then feebly muttered, "Maybe we could fix it," lifting a few pieces and trying to fit them together like a jigsaw. At which point Jerry bellowed, "Jim, for God's sake, leave it alone," while Paula growled menacingly, "Jim, go and sit down over there," pointing at the fireside sofa across the other side of the room. Jerry and Damien gathered up the chair pieces and took them out to the garage. Mary, obviously very upset, started to clear the table with Paula and Anne, carrying dishes to the kitchen, presumably concerned in case I broke anything else. By now I was sitting on the sofa where I had been ordered, beside the new glass-fronted fire. I was dragging on my cigarette furiously and mumbling repeated apologies. I felt very embarrassed, stupid, and wanted desperately to make some reparation there and then. Make the best of the circumstances, as Aristotle would say. Everyone was now in the kitchen washing and drying the dishes, each in turn casting frequent, deadly looks in my direction. The girls were consoling Mary, and Damien, as usual, was optimistically reassuring Jerry. "I know a man who fixes furniture cheaply." I, of course, was the offender in the dock. I needed to do something, anything, just to be helpful. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing, I thought. I feverishly looked around at the scene for something that I could do to help. And then I saw it. On the little coffee table in front of me, there was a large cut crystal ashtray, obviously expensive and probably a wedding present, and it was nearly full of cigarette butts. My brain sparked into action. I shouted towards the kitchen, "I'll just empty this ashtray, it's very full." There was a strange silence in response. I opened the glass door of the fire. It was a roaring furnace, and the heat blasted out towards me. I lifted the crystal ashtray and went to tip the butts and ashes into the flames. And then I heard Paula and Jerry in unison screaming, "No, for fuck's sake, no!" As I held the edge of the ashtray over the flames, I tipped it up, but it was very heavy, and its weight in the furious heat, I lost my grip, and the crystal ashtray tumbled into the burning coals. The screams behind me reached a collective roar. I gaped at the fire and felt an incredible panic overcome me. But for some crazy reason, I thought, I couldn't stop now. I turned to the kitchen and the now dumbstruck dishwashers and shouted, "Don't worry, I'll get it out." Now, you may have heard about amazing feats of strength and courage, for instance, when a pregnant woman discovers superhuman powers to lift the rear of a car to rescue her toddler. Well, in that moment of madness for me, I felt such a superpower course through my alcohol-flooded veins. I simply thrust my hand into the fire, grabbed the ashtray, lifted it out, and held it aloft with a flourish and a cheer. I felt so proud of myself. Yay! I got it! Instantly, I felt the excruciating pain of my burning fingers, let go of the ashtray, and it plunked at my feet onto the white hearth rug in front of the fire. I could hear more gasps and cries from the kitchen. I then saw the smoke rising from the ashtray, or should I say the white rug on which it sat, as the crystal ashtray burned a neat little round black hole in the soft, fluffy fabric. Pandemonium ensued. A broken chair, a melting ashtray, and a burned hearth rug. 3 accidents in the space of 30 minutes, and all because I didn't listen to my mother. After the very briefest of first aid treatment to my hand by Nurse Anne, Paula, by this way, was still searching her handbag for the checkbook, and many more apologies and offers by Paula to pay for all the damage we left for home, the dinner party was over. Following Aristotle's advice, I tried to maintain my dignity, be gracious, and I tried to make the best of the circumstances, but I suspect I failed. Jerry and Mary are still good friends. But in 35 years, we have never been invited for dinner again.
That's a mystery. Yes. By the way, Jim's wife, Paula, who plays a major role in nearly all his stories. You're free to talk to her during the break. Okay, our fourth storyteller. He came to Town by 9 a few years ago. We have not been able to shut him up since, and we wouldn't want to. He's brilliant. So please, a big warm welcome for Paul Brady.
Was that through an introduction? I thought it was going to be somebody else. It's not how you're usually that nice to me. The trick, they said, was not to sweat the small stuff. The trick, they said, was not to go to bed on an argument and start each new day with a clean slate. With experience, I've learned that there are some situations that all the tricks in the world won't help. When you move house, for instance, it's almost inevitable that there will be pistols at dawn at some point, and those pistols will be fired with venomous intent over absolutely nothing. I had planned to move well, executed it more or less perfectly, and yet here we were, the Duchess and I, in a car on a quiet mountain road, yelling at each other about which route would take us to Newton Abbey the quickest. I genuinely have no idea what started it, and I know it really wasn't about the quickest route to Newton Abbey, but it was full-blooded and with no quarter given. Now, I'm more of a huffer, and the Duchess is a shooter, but this row went on for so long and at such a ferocious rate that we started in our usual positions, passed each other halfway along Argument Street, and ended up at the other end. She ended up sullenly looking out the window in silence, while I ranted and raved until I eventually ran out of steam. It was then that I realised that it had actually happened. It was Darby and Joan's teabag. It was early 1991, and the Duchess and I were about to get married in her church, which was impossible without attending a residential engagement encounter weekend. So on a crisp February morning, we found ourselves in the hallway of a monastic retreat, weighing up the other 40 couples. Our host was a priest called Father something, but you can just call me Pete. He wore a grey tunic because he was cool and trendy, and Moses sandals with socks because he really, really wasn't. His helpers were an elderly couple who had christened Darby and Joan, pleasant but not warm, churchy. Simon and Rachel arrived with matching suitcases. Sorry we're late, Father, she gushed. We were at Mass and it got out late. I made the fingers down the throat book sign to the Duchess. They were a couple that my ma would have called a pair of sickeners. We fell in with two other couples immediately. Big Sean and Sinead, a big spade from West Belfast, who didn't say very much, but when he did, it was hilarious. And his lovely, talkative girlfriend, who was the type of wee girl who would link you when you were walking along and ask what the gossip was. Then there was Emmett and Colette. They had met in the back of a peeler jeep when they were both arrested at the same festival for being drunk and disorderly. He was a shit-kicking culchie from Ballymacna somewhere, and she was the same, only from Ballymacna somewhere else. They had met 6 weeks beforehand and were getting married for the crack. The Duchess was shown to her slightly fussy room on the female side. I was taken to my cell on bloke wing. An entirely concrete room with a single crucifix on the wall, and an alcove containing a physically short metal bed with a scratchy blanket. It was like an icebox. I could see my breath. All 40 couples were then called back together for an excruciating icebreaker event. Everyone had to do a thing. Rachel said a prayer for us all. Emmett laughed out loud at her. Darby and Joan brought one single box of warm white wine to do all 80 people. They apologised because they didn't know that wine had to be chilled. Big Sean told him to just stick it on the radiator in his cell for half an hour, and that would do the trick. That night, I squeezed my ample 6'4" frame into a half bed and slept fully clothed in the style of an accordion. The scratchy blanket was exactly the same size as the bed, so I had to have it either over my legs or over my torso, but not both. I wrapped my emergency cacks around my feet. I never even noticed the round red alarm bell on the wall, but I knew all about it the next morning when they set off the fire alarm to wake us all up. Darby and Joan were all aflutter. Today's special guest would be talking about sexual matters. In came these two buck idiots, who obviously made their own clothes and cut their own hair, to give us a talk on natural contraception, or as it was commonly known, the rhythm method. We called it then what we still call it now, Vatican roulette. So there are things that you should know at this juncture if you have no basic knowledge of sexual practices from the Middle Ages. It was automatically assumed that 80 people from 20 to 35 were all still virgins. It was also assumed that you didn't understand the term contraception or know that there were various alternative methods available. They automatically assumed that you were stupid and had lived your life up to that point under an extremely remote and extremely heavy Fenian rock. I said nothing when they told us that there was no other viable forms of contraception. I bit my lip when they talked in whispers about our various upcoming wedding nights when we would share ourselves for the first time. The Duchess gave me the look, the one that says, "Don't." But when they got out the office wall planner and a bag of stickers, I could contain myself no longer. By various temperature-taking methods, their planner was based around the wife's reproductive cycle. So there were red stickers for an obvious few days of the month that fell periodically. There were yellow stickers with a baby's face on them for the days that you could conceive if you were so inclined, or days to totally avoid if you weren't in the mood for a brood. There were a couple of green for go days, which were as safe as houses if you fancied some apparently consequence-free activity of a sexual nature. And all the space between red and green was filled with brown stickers, which were the fertility equivalent of dodgy ground. "Any questions?" said the hippie husband. The Duchess shot me another "don't do it" look. I replied with a "sorry love, I can't let this slide" look, and put my hand up. "Yes," he said patronisingly. "I don't mean to be funny," I lied. "But I noticed that there are only 3 green for go days on your whole chart, and they're all clumped together. So let's assume that you're following," a pause for effect, "this I made air bunnies method. You're telling me that you can only have sex," horrified gasps from Simon and Rachel, "on 3 very specific days when you'd better hope you've got nothing better to do. How do you make that work?" His patronising tone continued. "We find that the weight and the expectation makes those 3 days all the more fulfilling." I see. Yeah, I can't see that working for me, to be fair. "One more quick personal question, if you don't mind." "Fire away," he sighed. "If you don't mind me asking, how many kids do you guys have?" "8, he says. "But we planned them all." The room erupted into laughter. Even Simon and Rachel cracked a naughty smile. I sat back smugly and crossed my arms. I leant over to the Duchess and whispered, "The prosecution rests." The next day, Darby and Joan hosted How to Make a Marriage Work over a long period of time. Never go to bed on an argument, and don't sweat the small stuff, they began. Fair enough, I thought. And believe it or not, you'll have arguments that you will feel they will threaten your very marriage over the stupidest of things. Our worst ever argument was over a tea bag, and someday it will happen to you. In my memory, he now says that in a kind of dramatic, ghostly voice while pointing at the Duchess and I, but that may not have happened like that. We laughed with the carefree foolishness of youth and love. We married a month later. 30 happy years, 3 kids, 3 house moves, and here we were, sitting in silence on a mountain road, neither wanting to be the first to break the post-rage quiet. "So Darby and Joan were actually right after all this time," I says. I could see her trying not to smile. "This is no fucking tea bag," she said. "This is the best route to Newton Abbey. It's totally worth divorcing over." "Fine," I says. "Before you finally get rid of me, will we get some breakfast?" "Fine," she said. "But after we take your route to Newton Abbey, we're leaving the car home and we're going out for a drink. Vodka, not tea." "No worries, Joan," I says. As it turns out, I took my temperature this morning, and here, lucky for you, it's a green for go day. She started to laugh and nipped me on the arm, the universal sign I was back in the good books for a wee while.
I'm Paul Dorn. This is 10 by 9. Happy birthday, Black Box.